Welcome to the Waffle podcast, where we speak to senior leaders and business owners in the US staffing space who have achieved significant scale. Today, I'm speaking to the current US President of Specialist Staffing Group, Matt McManus. Matt started his career at Specialist Staffing Group almost 30 years ago, and his roles have evolved within the group from contract manager for Progressive to UK Managing Director, MD of APAC, President of Progressive and EVP of Commercial Operations, to now his current role as President of Specialist Staffing Group in the US. We discussed his career journey and how his role has changed over the years. Specifically, we chat about how Matt is now working on solidifying the role of the US business within Specialist Staffing Group and how his team is ensuring that they are outpacing tomorrow together. Specialist Staffing Group is the global STEM workforce consultancy working every day to bring skilled people together to build the future. With more than 38 years of experience in pure play STEM and a global team of 2,700 people with local experience across 11 countries, they cover high demand skills across engineering, life sciences and technology roles. Hope you're enjoying it. Matt McManus.
Hey James Ward, how are you, mate?
How you doing, mate?
Very good, thank you. And you?
Yeah, good. What an honour.
Thanks for the invite. It's good to catch up.
Podcast, The Waffle Maiden Voyage, and I've got Industry Elite #1 on as the first guest. So exciting times, mate. How are you keeping?
Very good. Everyone's well, the family's good, and seeing signs of positivity in the market and the company. So all very good on all fronts, thanks.
Good stuff, mate. Good stuff. All right, so obviously you're well known to a lot of people and certainly well known to me. But for those who don't know you, could you give us a brief intro into you and what you do and who you are and whatnot?
Yeah, so Matt McManus, I work for Specialist Staffing Group. I've been with our group of companies now for close to 3 decades for my sins, and I've worked across the UK. I ran our UK business for a number of years. I've worked in APAC, where I lived and worked and ran our APAC region for about 8 years. And then more recently, over the last decade, I've been involved in different roles and responsibilities for our US business. And more recently, I'm now the president and I run sort of the day-to-day operations for US business, as well as a global ExCo member on the board. So that's me in a nutshell.
Good stuff, mate. 30 years.
30 years, yeah. Some
That's
say
wild.
cold enough, but my boy, S3.
I think maybe some people who end up listening to this might not have been born when you started at S3 all those years ago. So I suppose could you, as you know, we want to focus on the US and the strategies and of course you scaling and building what you built in the US specifically, but equally I think it'd be great to get some context with regards to, obviously, I know you just touched on it briefly there with regards to your career overview, but kind of going a little bit back, providing a bit of context specifically about those different roles that you did, how the business has changed, evolved, or the group has changed and evolved throughout that time, and of course, seeing things from your perspective. So I suppose, take us back to 96. When did you, tell us all about that with regards to how you started, what the group looked like back then, and just your experiences from 96 onwards.
Yeah, so September the 5th, 1996, I joined Progressive, which is obviously one of our go-to-market brands within the group that specialises now largely on energy and engineering, but back then we were solely an IT or tech staffing company. And I joined us in our London office, which was our only office at the time. And the reason I joined simply was down to the people and what they said. So people like Sunil, who you remember, and Justin, Tim, Bill, Bottrell, and Simon, the founding fathers of the group. I was interviewed by all of them, and it was a fairly challenging interview process, but I really sort of thought to myself, these guys are ambitious, they have a very clear vision about where they want to take the organisation, and I thought, well, I'm pretty ambitious and I rate myself, but if I'm half as successful hanging on to the coattails of these guys, I might do something with myself. So It started back then, many years ago, and the industry, the company has obviously evolved and changed massively, as you'd expect over those 3 decades. But some things still remain true. Ultimately, we are a people business, and some of the things that we talk about being game changers in STEM, which is obviously our vision within the group, or whether we want to outpace tomorrow together as a company. I think whilst they are relatively new, they've always been part of our DNA. And I think it's why we've been able to not just survive but thrive across 3 decades.
Nice. So when you started on contract?
Correct.
AS400?
AS400, an IBM mid-range machine. So people know when we talk about sort of most of the staff not being born when I started. Well, I don't think many were, unless you've been in the profession for a while, won't remember AS400s either. So AS400 was good to me back in the day. It was a very popular market, and I was able to forge quite a successful consultant desk and build up a few more people as a team leader. So it was a very popular skill and very popular vertical back in the day. When I started in 2000, it was PC development, VB developers for me. So VB developers, C++, some of that stuff's still around, isn't it? Absolutely.
.NET, I was early stage .NET stuff.
Yeah, software development is still a huge market, both for us as a company, but broadly, if you go onto any of the job sites and sort of look at where the deficits are, despite all the advancements, software development is still a very, very big market across the board. So in different flavors and different languages. So still a big market. You'd
be hard pressed to find someone doing AS400 though, wouldn't you? I think
you might be. They've carved out a very good niche for themselves. If it still exists, I don't actually know. I don't think it. And then systems, but I'm sure they've been moved off.
Fair enough. And then you moved back up. Back up. Sorry, you moved up to Manchester.
Yeah, I think that was my first sort of big step into what I would call a leadership role and a management role at a relatively young age. And I remember back then thinking probably not 100% ready. I don't think anybody is, but sort of 23 years old, moving to Manchester from London, which seemed a million miles away at the time. And we didn't have anywhere near the systems and processes and ways of communicating that we do today. So it seemed a huge way away from the sort of head office and sort of the controls there. But it was a fantastic experience. I spent 5-6 incredible years in Manchester, and obviously you were part of that for many of those years, along with some other key individuals that I think really helped shape that office into being a very successful office. But it also helped shape me from becoming a very young, very inexperienced leader to learning some really important lessons that I think I've sort of brought forward in my career now, that I still ring true in terms of hard work, discipline, structure, being consistent in how you show up on a daily basis. So it was a great time, learned a lot, made a load of mistakes, as you'd imagine, being a young leader in the business. But I wouldn't change it for the world. It was fantastic.
I think, like back then, obviously, I know you mentioned it on your LinkedIn post last week. I think it was last week. We talked about sort of, high expectations and standards and all. I think we swapped some comments and other people did. And that is one thing that I think I remember most clearly about those days was the expectation and the high standards. It was, it was really, really high. Not in a overbearing way, but like I say, there's just an expectation in terms of sort of, what you brought to the table, in terms of work ethic, drive, pace, all those sorts of things. And that was driven by you, to be fair. So where was that always part of your sort of standard skill set, or was that something that was given to you and you had mentors in London that maybe give you, essentially trained you in that way?
Yeah, look, I think I've always played sport growing up to a relatively decent level. And I always had my family network around me, my father and my mother always encouraging me to be the best version of myself that I could be and challenging me. So I think there was always a little bit of that, and I think that's why I went into the industry in the first place is because I had some self-motivation, self-drive, self-discipline about myself, but there's no doubt at all that the people that I surrounded myself with in that London office in the early stages, people like Keith Southern and our friends, and Rich Buck and Justin Hughes in particular, certainly sharpened those skills. Gave me the basic base knowledge of the industry and the skills to be able to survive, but also we kept everybody honest. That level of competition and everybody raising the bar kept your socks pulled up on a day-to-day basis. You talk about expectations, and I think that's one of the things now that I still hold dear now. I genuinely believe if everybody understands what's expected of them, then they're more likely to succeed and be successful in the job. So it's something that we're really clear on now, even now, around what's expectations of each role within the organisation, because it does differ. Different roles, different stages of people's careers, it moves forward. But definitely around that. And as I said, I think we had some great people in that Manchester office that again kept me on my toes and made me sort of better at the job and a better leader at the time. And it fueled an environment where we had a huge amount of belief in that we could achieve what we set our minds to. And as I said, I love a sort of like a McManus quote, and it's like
McManusism.
Give me a little bit of belief and confidence over experience and knowledge any day of the week. I think it goes a long way. So,
expect what you inspect.
Yeah, there's a few others. That's the reason why I've had to go around the world. Everyone gets bored of them after a while.
You can keep recycling them. Well, after 30 years, some of the people haven't heard them, so you can bring out the old ones and repurpose them.
All the best ideas are stolen, as you say.
Right, fair enough. All good. So, obviously, did a great job in Manchester, and I think it's a really good point you make there. To be fair, is that you can have certain competencies, expectations, drive, everything else, but then you can't do it if you can't be the best version of yourself and achieve what you want to do if the people that you hire aren't at the similar sort of level. So you almost gain energy and gain sort of and I think obviously the people that we had in that business at the time, some really talented salespeople. I was like, when I first started, I was like, there's so much talent here, natural talent, young people. And even though I'd been in direct sales for 3.5 years and, I'd been doing okay, it was almost like, Jesus Christ, these guys are at a different sort of level completely. And it's almost like you sort of like elevate each other.
Yeah.
I think and that's what I remember from those days.
I think in any walk of life, you surround yourself with the right people, and that's going to be ring through of anything in any walk of life. So it is about the people you surround yourself with and the circles that you run in. And I think that they always make you better if you surround yourself with the right people.
What parallels do you see from back then to now? Because obviously that was a long time ago. I started 25 years ago. You've been in it nearly 30. What parallels do you see then that still ring true now? Because obviously this market, has evolved massively. It's gone 180 almost to a degree. But what do you see are the parallels between then and now in terms of success? And any other ideas that you can see, from that are similar.
So I think that, as I said, we've got our ambition of being game changers in STEM, our vision, and I think that's always rang true with us, even though it wasn't a tagline or something we talked about directly at the time. But I think that's always rung true. And I think, from my point of view, the parallels from then to now, I think one, the world changes, right? Whether it was going from paper-based advertising to online advertising to LinkedIn, you go forward now to AI and the new tech that's changing the industry again to a real proper digital industry from an analog world. That's been around for ages. We're not through, even though the pace of change is probably accelerated over the last few years post-COVID. That's always been around in the recruitment industry, and I think our ability to embrace that change, and not just tolerate it, but fully embrace it as an organisation, but as a business, I think is being a direct parallel to those times. I think prioritization around the things that really matter and focusing on the things that are really going to move the dial. Again, whether that's sort of in the day job and in the weeds in terms of the KPIs and the focus on the sort of activities that are going to move the dial, or whether that's the strategic priorities and the strategic pillars that you're focusing on that are going to move the dial in the market. I think it's crucial. And a lot of people can get distracted by a lot of noise or the next big thing and move away from the things that really matter in a day-to-day, week by week scenario. And then I think it's just, we touched on it, but it's about that relentless nature or that sort of dedication to excellence and turning up and being the best version of yourself on a day-to-day basis. And I think those individuals that are able to do that in the most consistent way, and as an organisation, create an environment where people can turn up and be the best version of themselves, I think is hugely similar to when we set up Manchester all those years ago, right? I don't think anything's changed there, despite obviously a huge amount of change in the overall industry.
100%. So obviously in Manchester, you got this to, I don't know what it was headcount wise at the at the peak.
Probably about 50 people, sort of 40.
Is that what it was?
People. Yeah.
Wow. Right. Okay. And then I forget when you actually moved to London, but I know it was post 9/11. I think it was shortly after that.
So actually, before I moved back down to London, I took over the Scotland office actually, and I was spending
That's right.
2 or 3 days a week in Glasgow, and then 2 days a week in Manchester, and then vice versa. And that was sort of my first exposure of having to manage through others and managing through sort of SOPs and process and things like that, which again was a great learning curve. And I used to say I was flying out of the country on business in those days, sort of to Glasgow, sort of more glamorous than it was. But,
you probably thought that from coming from the south to the north.
But it was a great opportunity to learn, develop. Again, added something to another set of skills, another opportunity to grow and develop. And bring my skill set forward, and that was great. And then the next step was I moved back down to London. I took over the London office at the same time as managing through Claire Daintith, at the time Nee Ward, now Nee Daintith, and managing through Stuart Clark, who was running our Glasgow office. And so it gave me a really good opportunity then to have multiple offices and managing through others in that business. And again, great learning curve, and another step forward in the career. I suppose that most people who've stayed in recruitment for a long time, it's a sort of steady progress in terms of increasing your remit.
100%. So what was back then? That was London. So I suppose what wasn't in your remit at that point was about probably Reading and Bristol.
It was Reading,
Birmingham.
Bristol in Birmingham.
Right. Okay.
And then that sort of after sort of another couple of years of managing those remits, my businesses were doing quite well. We had the opportunity to take over the whole of the UK, which was again a great opportunity to learn, develop, take on a broader role, continue on my leadership journey, which was great. And again, we went through quite a lot of change then, because we went through being just in the tech sector within Progressive at the time, so then diversifying into things like life sciences and healthcare in the UK. We diversified into other areas of public sector. And we diversified into engineering, which then actually led us to get into sort of oil and gas and the energy side of things. So we went through quite a transformative sort of journey in those first few years of me being leading the UK business, which actually spurred some really exciting growth in the organisation, both from a headcount point of view, but overall sort of profits and things like that. So it was a really exciting part of the journey. And again, constantly challenging myself, taking myself out of the comfort zone. That's what the company did. And so many people say, why are you there sort of 3 decades later? And it's because I've had the opportunity to experience so many different projects and programs of work and everything else.
I think also as well, obviously, you've been prepared to do, I'm not maybe what other people aren't prepared to do, but for example, you moved from London to Manchester, from Manchester to London, and we'll get on to, of course, or your international moves after that. But not everyone will do that, will they? You know what I mean? It's like, some people don't like to relocate. They don't like to too much change. They don't, but you've always been clearly prepared to put your hand in the air and say, okay, if it makes sense, let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, look, if people present you with an opportunity, then I think people are, like I say, I understand people have their own personal challenges and personal lives and things like that. But again, I've been lucky that I've had a great partner in my life to help support me do that, and a family that has encouraged to do that. And I think, like I say, from an early age, my dad was an immigrant into the country and moved away from his family. So I suppose there was an element of DNA in there, that willingness to do that. But no, I think every stage has been brilliant. And like I say, we've embraced that change. We've met some amazing people. And again, we've got lifelong friends that from Manchester, our time in Manchester, and lifelong friends from time in Glasgow. So no, very good memories, and I wouldn't change it.
Good stuff. So obviously you took on the UK contract role. You were doing that for how long before
probably 2 or 3 years overall.
Right. And then talk us through what happened next.
Yeah, so we had the opportunity, we were going sort of broader. We already had a very successful European business across the group, not just Progressive. And there was an opportunity to go a bit further afield. That's when we were expanding into places like the US and Asia. And I was given the opportunity then to work for the group rather than Progressive. And that meant moving to Singapore. We went with a really crack team. It was a very, very talented team that we went to Singapore with. We went with 3 of our brands. We went with Progressive, Huxley, and Augtel. And we grew the region out from there. So Huxley already had a small operation in Hong Kong that was doing okay. And then we set up in Singapore, and then from there we grew operations in Australia, in Perth and Sydney. We had Hong Kong, Singapore. We set up Japan office, and then we had sort of operating offices out of Malaysia and Thailand in order for us to run contractors and run business over there from a compliance point of view. So really interesting, really different, as you can imagine, going from the UK to Asia, where culturally it's very different, not just in Singapore, but every single country you go to. The compliance and legislative environment is very, very different. And the market was very, very different. It was mostly permanent. Contract was very, very small. And so, again, lots of opportunities to flex the skill set and flex the sort of the grey matter. But it was an amazing experience for me, and I had a young family at the time as well. I think, I grabbed it with both hands. It was fantastic. I loved it.
Because that really is a big shift, isn't it? Because I think back then, and again, I don't know much about that side of the world. I know it was around the time that there was a lot of people setting up in Singapore. And there seemed to be, a big trend towards it. You can tell me more about why that was, market, drivers, whatever. But were you not like, you guys were some of the first out there, maybe UK firms that were, essentially expanding out there. So there wasn't really a blueprint or a path to follow, in terms of understanding that market. And you mentioned their cultural differences, which is one thing, which must be huge. But like you say, contracts, law, like I say, all the the word I can't pronounce, all that stuff. So how did you navigate all that? How did you work that out? And was it up to you to kind of work all that stuff out and essentially, provide that kind of blueprint and business plan and something robust that the team could follow?
Yeah, well, obviously it's a lot more than myself. There's a great team around, and we had the team consisted of different skill sets. So we have people from a commercial background in our HQ supporting us. We had our strategic team there. We had our compliance team, legal teams, and so certainly it wasn't all on me. It was a completely company effort, as you'd expect from a global PLC at the time. You'd expect to leverage all of that, and so. But there was definitely the strategic sort of design and development of how we executed there was with myself and the team the leadership team that we had in place.
Yeah.
But again, as I said, it was a great learning curve of how to set up, structure things from the ground up in a way
Yeah.
that is compliant, that is allows you to operate, mitigating the risks, and ultimately taking advantage of the different sort of market dynamics that were in place in each of the locations.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was really interesting, and it was a great place, and very fond memories of doing that, and a great part of my career. And I would say probably the steepest learning curve of my career, but the one where I feel like it's probably developed me the most. Both from sort of cultural sensitivity point of view, but from a commercial acumen point of view, it really did sort of challenge and develop. It was really great, and again made some lifelong friends both within the company and outside of the company. Many of which are still operating in there today. Some have gone on to do really big jobs that we still keep in contact with and share information on. So yeah, it's been great.
Yeah. Do you think that sometimes when you go into these, big roles, new locations, new territories, that sort of thing, that you just kind of got not necessarily go in blind, but you almost have to go in with, an attitude of let's just work it out as we go, or you can overthink these things, can't you, with regards to the cultural differences, the market nuances, like you say, all the compliance and everything else. If you're not and we've seen this with regards to the US, people kind of kick the idea around for 2 or 3 years, if not longer, before they actually make the move. Whereas I think with what I always experienced that from my time at S3, certainly in the earlier years, was like we can do anything. We can set up anywhere and take this model and this blueprint and this kind of almost mindset, and we can make it work wherever we are. So, and I think obviously, of course, you've always thrown yourself into these things. Do you think that's
Yeah. Look, I definitely think you can't just sort of. I think anybody that goes into any new country or region or market without doing some homework and basing things on some data and facts and information is probably a little naive and we'll probably lose a few quid along the way. So we definitely had plans. We definitely looked at our external data, both client data, and we tried to leverage our clients that we were dealing with globally as much as we could, which we did very successfully. We looked at external data in terms that was available around Bureau of Labour statistics and job board data and things like that to understand where the roles were and where the needs were. And we just spoke a lot to customers. We got out there in the early days. We got out tons. We would do 30 or 40 client visits ahead each, myself included, to really truly understand what the demand was within the in the different sectors that we were servicing. That gave us really, really good insight in terms of where we were going to play and where we could win ultimately. But definitely, I would encourage anybody to look to the data and put their trust in data. And again, no matter how well planned you are, the test of a good plan is the first time it engages with the enemy, as they say in the military, where it's like how robust it is. Or if you're in boxing terms, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And then, as Mike Tyson said, so for me, it's how robust your plan is where you first engage with it. And there's no doubt at all, the plan that we had, the initial plan that we went there with, wasn't the final plan that we had. We've gone through
it evolves. Yeah.
But I've always tried to sort of, when I've gone in to either do bigger roles or to new territories, I've always tried to keep some of the basics of what we've said that we would do by not being all things to all people, focusing in and having a niche and really narrowing that, doubling down on those things. And so, like I say, inch wide, mile deep sort of mentality towards things. And that's always held us in good stead wherever we've gone. But going back to those basics and what's made you successful whilst trying to navigate new challenges and new opportunities.
Yeah. And what would you say in terms of, because at this point, obviously in your career, like you say, you were starting to manage through others, when you took over the Scotland office, and you was of course doing that when you took over the UK role. And now, of course, you're in a brand new location. What was your sort of, I suppose, leadership philosophies, with regards to how you sort of empowered others and how you developed leaders and how you engage with leaders and how did you, inspire leaders and retain them, fundamentally. And I suppose, is that similar sort of philosophies then that you have now, or is that, changed over time as well? What can you say about your, sort of, strategies around leadership?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in there in terms of lots of different questions. But I think, look, I'm still learning, right? I'm certainly by no means the finished article, and I'm still learning as I'm going, right? And I think that's the journey that I think everybody's on. It. Anybody that tells you they've got the secret formula is probably lying, right? So I'm still learning as I'm going along, and still make mistakes, and I think so. By no means the finished article, but I think. For me, I think some of the things that, again, I think ring true is structure follows strategy. So if you've got the right structure in place with the right people in the right roles, execution becomes very, very easy. And when you have the wrong people in the wrong roles, then it becomes very challenging. So I think getting that right structure in place and understanding the right spans and layers in the organisation so that you can actually... I'm a great believer in having a flatter hierarchy if possible, because I think then the communication can get through to the organisation. You can impact things quicker, and it really allows you to, I think, move faster as an organisation. So that structure, I think, is incredibly important. I think making sure that everybody understands what's expected of them in their role and what they are accountable for and own what they own. I think is really important. So that whether you call it an accountability framework or an empowerment framework or there's lots of different versions of it, but making sure that people understand what is expected of them on a day-to-day basis and what they're accountable for, I think is really important.
Yeah.
And again, I know it's a bit of a cliche, but responsibility breeds accountability. So if you give people the responsibility to come up with the plan, be involved in the plan, have a say and get skin in the game, people are more likely to take accountability, own it, and run with it. And so again, very rarely do we make decisions in isolation. So whether it's at a group level, we work as a team. Whether it's in the US, very much I have a very tenured leadership team that I feel very lucky to work with, that help me make the best possible decision together. And it's about having all the brains in the game, right? And then you're likely to make the best decision. You might not always get it right, but you'll make the decision that you feel is right between all of you, and then you can ask people to own it and run with it. And then it's about having the right business rhythm in place to manage and monitor it and ensure that it's governed. There's loads of layers to that. But that's
That's a pretty deep question to ask.
Make sure that sort of those things structurally, foundationally are in place, and then it becomes much easier then to execute against the tactical plans and the resource plans that you might need.
Nice. So that leads us on to the US then, which is of course the area we want to sort of focus on ideally. So what happened then? Obviously, you had a really successful Asia business. I mean, what was the sort of the max sort of size of that? And I mean, you really you had some great numbers over there, didn't you, in terms of performance levels, and all that kind of thing. So, what did that get up to? And then what happened with regards to the US move?
Yeah, I think we got up to I think close to 250 sales consultants at the time, or individuals at the time in APAC. And things were going okay, but ultimately the Asia Pacific region was only ever going to be so big for the group. And there was a significant shift in the oil and gas market. I think you might remember in 2015 the oil price absolutely crashed, and that was a big part of our organisation in Singapore, Australia, along with mining, and that was a challenge. So the market had shifted, that had impacted things, and the group was looking at where our big bets were, and it's no secret that the US is the biggest recruitment market in the world, especially for the STEM recruitment market where we play. It also has the largest contract market by a country mile. And so when we were looking at our resources and aligning to what my ambitions were, there was an opportunity to move to the US and be part of the leadership team over there at the time. I just thought from a career point of view, an ambition point of view, market opportunity point of view, I probably had one move left in me. And I thought, right, yeah, well, let's go for it, because some of the numbers that our US business was posting at the time were really exciting. And I thought it would be a really good opportunity for me to get back to my core, which was obviously around that sort of contract business. So, and I made the move in 2015. So I've been in the US business now or involved in our US business now for just about a decade.
Right. And what did the US business look like at that point? 2015. So, how many offices? Where were they? How big was it? When you first went.
Probably a similar sort of office infrastructure to where we are now. We had a San Francisco office as well at the time, which we don't have now. But it was probably a similar sort of office infrastructure at the time. And we operated across Huxley, Computer Futures, Progressive, and Madison Black. And we were probably more like a 50-50 contract to perm business at the time. I'd say one of the mandates that we wanted to do was grow out our contract business, but not at the cost of permanent. And so it was about expanding that. And so that's really where our focus was. In addition to that, as I mentioned, the oil and gas market had seen a significant decline. And so we wanted to diversify our progressive offering outside of just oil and gas into other areas of energy, and that's where we moved into our power utilities business and our renewables business, which over the last sort of decade we've seen significant growth, and that's allowed us to now get into the top 10 of the largest engineering and energy staffing firms in the US. So that's been some huge growth for us and really exciting journey over the last 10 years. But again, those market choices and making strong decisions, I think were some pivotal in some of the growth that we've seen over the last 10 years.
Yeah, definitely. Well, some of the numbers that you guys have been posting, particularly in those markets, are like pretty wild, aren't they? Sorry, go on.
I think there's no doubt at all the market has been challenging over the last few years, and I think every company in the industry will tell you that they probably had a slightly tougher time than they did sort of the post-COVID boom, where I think most people were doing really, really well. But I think we are seeing some really positive signs in the macroeconomic environment, certainly in the US, more so than we've seen in our European and UK businesses. And I think that's coming through in terms of some of the optimism that we're seeing, whether it be the SIA Bullhorn data, where you're seeing the hours being worked by contractors growing week over week, or whether that's the SAMS recession moving further away from recession, whether that's the unemployment is still very, very low. I think a lot of the indicators point to some real optimism in the market. And as we talked about, you don't need huge GDP growth numbers to grow. What you need is optimism and confidence. And I think we're starting to see that come back somewhat in the US. And because of that, I think ourselves and our competitors are seeing some healthy growth now, which is really positive.
Yeah. So when you took that role, when you took the US role, that was progressive specific.
It was dual role. So I ran our progressive business at the time because we were brand led within the US at that time. We moved since to a regionally led model. But I also had a specialist staffing group role where I was the EVP of commercial operations. So anything to do with the middle office, credit control, FinOps, the commercial functions, our customer success team, that type of stuff all reported into me, and then I was sat on the overall board for SSG in the US with Morgan Kavanagh and Scott Fulton at the time. So
So what was the sort of, again, I know in terms of the office sort of infrastructure, headcount wise, how big was it then? Maybe not necessarily compared to now, but because I know, of course.
I think we're probably, like I say, it's hard to say 10 years ago. I think if I go back to sort of, probably we are comparable to where we were in 2019 in terms of headcount, but in terms of actual net fees and everything else,
right.
we're significantly higher. But in terms of headcount, we're probably similar,
Yeah.
with a similar sort of office infrastructure.
Yeah. Okay. So your time in Houston, how do you enjoy that? Obviously, again, very different than where
Yeah.
you've been over in Singapore for many years. You know, how did you find the move to the US? You've not lived in the US before. How did you find, like you say,
Yeah.
cultural differences, market differences? You
I,
know.
I love Texas. I thought it was brilliant. I think the people there are fantastic.
Yeah.
You get good bang for your buck. And I think from a business perspective, it's a phenomenal state, right? There's
Yeah.
lots of opportunities across the STEM sectors. So I really enjoyed it. The reason I chose Houston was partly because all of our operations and were actually based there, so it made sense for me best. But I could have been based anywhere in the US. But I chose Houston largely because, again, the cultural diversity. People don't always associate Houston with cultural diversity, but it's actually one of the most culturally diverse cities in the US. And having come from Singapore, which is hugely culturally diverse, that was something that was important both for myself, but also for my family and my kids. I wanted
Yeah.
them to grow up in a culturally diverse environment and be a citizen of the world. So, and that was certainly the case. It really did give access to loads of different sort of cultures and backgrounds and beliefs and stuff. So, which was brilliant. But also from a business perspective, it was great. So loved the time in Houston. Obviously, did a lot of travel anyway to the other US
Yeah.
cities. But I think one of the advantages, I talked about the Singapore being a steep learning curve, but also quite pivotal in my career. I think the two things that I really took from that allowed me to hit the ground running when I came into the US was that cultural sensitivity and the commercial acumen, specifically around sort of the ECM part, or what they call W2 in
Yeah.
the US. And
Yeah.
if I think about a lot of UK recruiters or UK staffing companies and individuals, those are the two biggest mistakes I see. Is one, because they speak the same language, they think culturally they're the same. And living in America, it's very different,
Of course.
and in many respects. And I think you've got to appreciate that and respect the fact that you're actually in somebody else's country, and therefore you
Yeah.
need to adapt to that. And then second of all, obviously a lot of the European companies focus on contract from an independent contractor point of view, so that corp to corp relationship,
Yeah.
whereas that's such a small part of the overall US market. The largest part is the W2, and that requires a different business model, different commercial acumen, different commercial setup in terms of pricing and everything else. And you're also taking a lot more risk, and you need to put sort of risk mitigations and compliance things in place. So I think because of the experiences I had of both those elements in Singapore, it allowed me to integrate into the US quite well. And I say that and plus integrating the family meant that started off on a really good footing and haven't looked back since. And great decade. And as I said, I've got a very tenured team, many of which I've worked with now for most of those 10 years. So fantastic.
And what would you say were your biggest challenges? And maybe a better question is, if you had your time again, knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently?
Good question. I think one of the challenges is scaling and internal headcount. As you well know, we are completely organically grown, and largely our model is hiring sort of either graduates or sort of second job individuals and growing out there, and that requires a certain infrastructure and a certain ways of working and whatever else, which I think we've been very successful at over the years. But there's no doubt at all. Scaling and hiring on that mass, onboarding on mass, and getting people up to speed. That there's definitely a challenge, and I think that's something that we're still finding our feet on now. And as I said, even though we're not against M&A, we are actively involved in looking at things like that. We haven't pulled the trigger yet, but at some stage or another in the future, if you look at all the companies now that are above us in terms of size and scale, the majority have either been in the market 30 years longer than us or have either merged or acquired. So I think creating scale and doing it at scale is where I think is a real challenge. And there's a reason why most companies, when they get from they're flourishing at 10, 15 people, but getting to 50 people, that's the reason why a lot of people fail and people fall by the wayside, is because that scaling is a challenge.
100%. With regards to it's a good point, this, with regards to the organic model, the trainee model, and it's something that we hear a lot. I mean, not that, of course, we do the trainee level or anything, but we do hear a lot that it's a big challenge, more of a challenge here in the US than what it is actually in the UK, and it's not easy back there either. So would you, and of course I know it depends on state, very different in New York, for example, to California, or Texas to, California or whatever. But what's your experience of that with regards to, it's never easy, right? It's an expensive model to get right. But would you say the challenges are the same but different, or the level of challenge is the same but different out here in the US with regards to that sort of hiring model versus the UK?
Yes, I would say it's the challenging still, right? I think you've probably got a more densely populated recruitment market in the UK in terms of the number of small UK recruitment companies and few-man bands compared to the US, but inevitably it's still the same in terms of the challenges. And I think there's pros and cons to looking at both multiple models, right? And I think you've just got to think about what you want to get out of it, who you are, and what's the cultural identity that you're looking to build. And I think certainly the identity that we're looking to build is this sort of S3 way, which is sort of dedication to excellence and the high-performing sales culture. And there's a reason why lots of mergers and acquisitions failed, because culturally it's very hard to find alignment and weave them in. And if you think about that down at an individual level, if you're hiring in lots and lots of people that have had experience at other companies that have grown up in that culture, trying to integrate them into a culture and get the best of both worlds is a real challenge, right? And so it's about getting the balance right. Like I say, we're not against that. We hire experience. Obviously, clearly, we hired individuals by you, but I think it's about strategic hiring that are going to complement and speed up your business rather than as an alternative. But there's challenges to every model. I'm sure, like I say, people who have grown through acquisitions have gone through challenges and will say other things.
And if you was speaking to a business owner, they're looking to set up in the US, looking to take some market share in the US, maybe they've been recruiting from afar for a little while and looking to physically launch in the US, what advice would you give them?
You have to commit. So don't see it as sort of like we'll dip our toes in and see. It's got to be a full commitment and a medium to long-term commitment, because otherwise it's going to be a very expensive, ordeal project. You need to fully commit to it and fully throw yourself into it. If I was a business leader myself, or owner, I would potentially take the stance that I would need to be there. That's a big one. That's a big one. Because I think that I personally, as you said, I've moved over the road. I have very much an owner mentality within our group of companies, and I think having your sort of making the commitment, I think one speaks volumes, and the commitment you're making, but two, I think overseeing it and getting up and running it, I think is something that I would do if I was the business owner, if it was my own capital. Yeah. And then I just make, like I say, don't try and be all things to all people. Pick something that you can be a specialist in, and go deep and around that. It's such a big market that if you can get lost. So the greater the focus and direction, and this is something I tell my business all the time, the more focus and direction that we can have, the easier the job, the smaller the market becomes, but the easier it becomes to execute. And I think sometimes people see the size and scale of the US and they get lost, and it's like, wow, this is amazing, right?
Different states all over the place, different markets, and it's
and I think it's about picking and saying that and building your networks, rather than trying to service everyone on all things, right? And then the second area that I think a lot of the UK firms, and we made as well, they go to the sort of the obvious bright light cities, which tend to be the most expensive and the most employee employee sort of friendly, but not employer friendly, like New York, San Fran and stuff. And there's some amazing, huge cities that you wouldn't have thought of in the US that offer huge opportunities from a sort of STEM sector specialist areas, right? And they've got access to big talent. So yeah, probably go to what I would call one of the second cities, rather than sort of the bright lights and the glamour that where you tend to get driven to. So
Yeah.
those would probably be some of the advice that I would give if I was setting up on my own, or if I was investing my own capital in it.
What we see quite a lot with the UK owned firms that are in the US is they quite often like to, of course, work full desk 360. So they like to go where other UK firms are typically, because that, of course, they have full desk 360. And of course, if they're looking to hire experienced people, they want to be where all the other UK firms are. Obviously, the issue with that is the fact that the talent pool is so small. If you're only looking to fish out of a pool full of, UK-owned firms sort of thing, but they generally do gravitate towards the same cities, New York.
Yeah, and as I go back to my other part, I mentioned earlier about scale. That's going to get you at some stage or another. You're going to have to become an American firm. You're employing Americans if you want to scale. So it's down to what you want to get out of it. But yeah, at some stage or another, you are going to have to embrace the culture, understand the culture, and this is why, again, from a leader perspective, being over here, they have a much better chance of understanding that than trying to do it from afar.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, all good. So career-wise, then, of course, you was in Houston. You were doing the progressive, the commercial role. How did things evolve from there?
Yeah, so I came back to the UK. I moved back to the UK, and it was actually just before COVID, and so I continued to actually do my role in the US because no one was going to the office, so it didn't really matter where I lived in the world at that stage. As a company, we have realised for some time now that we've needed to develop and grow and move with the times. And so we had a big digital program of work around our tech transformation, where we were completely sort of swapping out our ATS CRM, building some proprietary middle office platforms around our onboarding and time and expense, and then we were implementing a new ERP as well. So it was a significant investment from the group, and the group wanted to have somebody that sort of worked across multiple countries, had understood the end-to-end sort of order to cash process of the organisation, and had experience of working in multiple departments and oversight. And so there was an opportunity for me to move into become sort of the global business owner for those areas, which again was a new thing completely. I was responsible for pulling together with a group of individuals and our COO business case, selecting vendors, working with building a product team out to help develop those products and platforms, and then start the implementation. And the US actually went first. So we went first in Houston within the progressive business because of the sort of ties that I had there and whatever else. And then did that for about 18 months. And then moved back into the sort of role that I am now, which is obviously leader in the US business.
Nice. And what does the US business look like now? What's the future look like? Where are you guys going? What's the direction of travel?
So we've evolved a fair bit, I think, over the years. And so, as you're aware, we focus on the STEM industries and sectors. So it's largely our sort of technology sector, our energy and engineering, our pharma and life science, where we're really strong in the US. We've got a really good, strong market share there as well. And then within our sort of banking and finance space, namely under the Huxley brand. And so that's ring true, but we're far more disciplined now in our approach and go-to-market in where we play and where we operate. And so that's been our major focus. Second of all, I think we've really evolved from just being a recruitment company or a staffing agency now. We've gone beyond. We offer many things like project solutions, compliance, advisory, and like real-time market insight. Anybody that will see us on socials will know that we do a lot around that. Particularly around our sort of some of the research that we do in the STEM industry, which then gives us insights in order where we're going to play, but also help support the communities that we serve, both from a client and candidate point of view. So we developed functionality in our products and services way beyond just becoming a staffing provider now, which I think you have to do. Or if you're not doing it now, certainly you need to look at that. We're embracing technology more than ever. So I said at the top of the call that I think recruitment is probably the last bastion of the analog world, but it's changing rapidly. And I think more and more it's moving to a digital piece, and that pace is just gathering now. You see how many companies there are, and some of our old colleagues that work in that space and tech stacks. That's incredibly important. I'm a great believer that technology is going to impact both from an effectiveness point of view, so making people more productive on the sales side, but also on the efficiency point of view, where you can scale your business and not have to add sort of loads and loads of heads to do sort of administrative and operational tasks. So on both those sides, that's going to be really big, and that's been one of the reasons why we've put so much time, energy, and effort and dollar investment into our tech transformation, because I think that platform is going to give us a huge competitive advantage going forward and allow us to provide great services to our clients and candidates. And I think ultimately we are focusing on really helping organisations outpace that skills gap. Whether it be through getting ahead of the AI sort of implementations, whether that's all the things around it in terms of the infrastructure, the data, the security that's required. We work very closely with power utility companies and how that world's shifting and changing, and the infrastructure upgrades that's going on. And obviously then it's very well documented that we're working hand in glove with some of the biggest pharma and med device companies in the world to solve those problems. So I think it's about, we are well positioned as a global provider, but really within those STEM sectors, it puts us in quite a unique position, I think, to help solve some of the world's biggest problems. Which I think is fairly meaningful. People turning up to work is not just about coming in every day and then sort of wanting to put sort of business on the board. It is about sort of thinking a bit bigger than that. So yeah, it's definitely evolved, and it's only gathering pace now. So who knows what it's going to look like in another year, let alone 10 years. Yeah.
And what does the future look like for you, mate? What in terms of your role? You know, obviously you're 30 years in now.
Yeah.
Looks like there's still some life in the old dog yet. What's the what's the future like for you?
So myself and my team in the US, we've obviously set ourselves some pretty ambitious goals over the next few years, and I think that's incredibly important that we see them through. We're on track. We're bang on track where we want to be, which I think is really encouraging, and I'm really pleased with how well our leadership team is executing against the plan. And as I said, I feel very fortunate to work with a really talented and tenured team, which I think makes my life easy. So I think we've got some really ambitious goals there. I think as the group, we've got some really ambitious goals. We obviously want to grow our market presence and our market share. We want to continue to give returns to investors as a sort of publicly traded company. That's really important to us. And obviously we want to continue to sort of shape and help the communities that we serve, both from a business perspective, but you'll remember from your time in the company that we're in pretty privileged position, and there's lots of communities and people around the world that aren't in that. So we do a lot of work for charitable organisations and from an ESG perspective, which is, again, been part of our DNA from a very long time, from Bill's time and Simon's time, but certainly stayed with us throughout that. So yeah, we've got big global ambitions. We want to double the size of ourselves as an organisation, and that might seem crazy where a market that's contracting and a lot of our competitors are down year over year, but we still remain steadfast in our sort of ambitions, and yes, it might take us a little longer to get there now, but certainly we want to double the size of our organisation, and like I say, put ourselves really on the map as a big player in the markets we choose to serve. I don't think we'll go to any new geographies, I'm being brutally honest, over the next few years. I think we're in the best best locations from a country point of view. But we'll definitely open up new offices and new locations in the US, looking at places like Atlanta, Tampa, Orlando, Phoenix, Sacramento. These are locations that we're looking at that I think are incredibly exciting.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, mate. I think we'll just about bring it to a head then. Thanks very much for your insight, mate. Very much appreciated. Like I say, honoured for you to be the first guest on our on the Waffle. So thank you for everything there, all the insight and all detail, and running us through that. And thanks so much.
Cheers, mate.
This episode was brought to you by Clarity R2R. Clarity R2R are a leadership recruitment to recruitment firm specialising in hires from AVP and business manager level through to board. We work with firms both founder-led and enterprise level. Should you wish to know more, please do get in contact.